Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a blue, black and red or Grixis Control deck that got a lot of new toys in Aether Revolt. So let's take a look at the entire deck here, starting out with Fatal Push straight from Aether Revolt, a nice efficient removal spell for single black, killing creatures with converted mana cost 2 or less and with Revolt converted mana cost 4 or less. Also hits creature lands, of course, because they have converted mana cost of 0. So just a great removal spell in this kind of deck. Only running 2 copies, not the full 3 that we could play, just because we don't want to overdo it on the cheap creature removal, because we of course still have a lot of other removal spells as well. We also have Jace Vryn's Prodigy, great in any deck with lots of instants and sorcery, so no exception in Grixis Control. Transforms into Telepath Unbound. That does a lot of great things for the deck. We're also running Thing in the Ice, which did get significantly worse now that Fatal Push is in the format, because of course we're not the only deck running Fatal Push, other decks can also be running that card, and can also just kill the Thing in the Ice even when it's transformed, because the converted mana cost will still be 2, they changed that rule not too long ago. Otherwise the converted mana cost might have been 0, but anyways, Fatal Push can kill Thing in the Ice or Awoken Horror for just 1 mana, so the card did get a bit worse, since it used to be able to survive all those cheap removal spells, but still a fine card that does put the opponent under some pressure and buys you time until you can resolve maybe a more expensive Planeswalker to take over the game with. We're also playing 2 Telling Times to smooth out our draws a bit, provide some more instants that we can play when holding up counter spells, and also an instant for our Torrential Gearhulk. Then Harness Lightning, probably the best 2 mana instant speed removal spell in the game, can work very well with our energy theme that we've got going on in the deck, and we can maybe store up some energy from the first Harness Lightning to use it on the second one, and so on. So just a great card in the deck. Then we get to some of our counter spells. We've got 2 Scatter to the Winds, which we can awaken, but most of the time this is just going to be a cancel, so 1 double blue for a counter spell. Same with Broken Concentration. The Madness is probably not going to come up. The only way we can enable this on the opponent's turn would be with Jace Vryn's Prodigy, discarding it. Then we get to some sweepers. We've got 1 Kozilek's Return, which is an instant speed sweeper, which is the important part here, dealing 2 damage to each creature, so great against any token strategies. And of course being an instant plays very well with our instants and other counter spells. We've got 3 Unlicensed Disintegration, which is basically just a murder in this deck most of the time. We barely have any artifacts, but just being easier on the mana than murder, because this is black and red while murder is double black. So when you're fetching for lands, for example, you can more easily fetch a black and a red source than it is 2 black sources. So just easier on the mana, and sometimes when you have a Gearhulk in play, for example, that 3 damage that maybe can be redirected to opposing planeswalkers can be irrelevant. And then another sweeper here in Radiant Flames, 2 copies, dealing most of the time 3 damage to each creature, thanks to Converge. And so those are all the sweepers in the deck. We're not playing any Languishes or Yahanis Expertises, so just the 1 Kozilek's Return and 2 Radiant Flames, just because we have enough removal in the deck to deal with most creature decks. We also have 1 Liliana the Last Hope, which does a lot of great things, taking out small creatures, returning some of our win conditions to our hand, and of course the ultimate can also close out a game. We also have Kalitas, which goes well in any deck with lots of spot removal, and especially combines nicely with cards like Radiant Flames or Kozilek's Return. If you can land him and then follow up with a sweeper, he survives the sweeper and you get a bunch of zombies for each creature you've killed from the opponent. Then we have Glimmer of Genius, very important to have some card draw in a control deck to get ahead of the opponent. Also works very well with our counter spells, so we can hold up counter spell mana, but if the opponent doesn't play into our counter, we can just Glimmer of Genius and get ahead. Then we've got a Chandra Torch of Defiance, which does a lot of different things here, being a removal spell of sorts, can get some card advantage with the +1, can add some mana if that's necessary, and also the ultimate can close out the game very quickly. But then we get to some of the more exciting cards here in the deck. We've got Disciple of the Ring, which has been an all-star for a very long time in this kind of deck. People usually underestimate it, but if this can come down with a few spare mana and a few instants in your graveyard, it's going to be very difficult for the opponent to recover. Can counter all sorts of planeswalkers or sweeper effects, can tap down annoying creatures, can protect your planeswalkers, kind of just does it all, and a very important card in this kind of deck. Then another very exciting card from Aether Hub is Dark Intimations. You can pretty much ignore the second part of the card, but the first part is basically a 4/1. Opponent discards, you draw, opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, which is very important because usually Grixis struggles with resolved planeswalkers. So this is a nice answer to those, and you also get to return a creature or planeswalker. So let's say the opponent used a Fatal Push on your Thing in the Ice in the early game, now you get it back. Let's say your opponent killed one of your planeswalkers, now you get it back while getting some other card advantage as well. So just a fantastic card. Then we also have Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, another nice planeswalker that can draw us into some more cards. Same with Ob Nixilis, also draws cards with the +1 and deals with creatures with the minus ability. And then of course Torrrential Gearhulk, great in any control deck with lots of instants, and no exception here. Also plays well with Unlicensed Disintegration. And then finally Chandra, Flamecaller, another sweeper effect in the deck, and also great at taking out opposing planeswalkers with the +1. And then our mana base, 26 lands, because we are a control deck, so we want to hit our land drops every turn. 4 islands, 2 swamps. We are heavy blue for those double blue counterspells. Then 2 Wandering Fumaroles, which are also great. 2 Smoldering Marsh, 2 Sunken Hollow, 2 Catacombs, 2 Sulfur Falls, 2 Dragonskull Summits, and then 2 Aether Hubs. We could run the full 3, but I think going the full 3 might be a little risky because it's not like we have a ton of energy producing cards, so we might run into the problem of running out of energy and then having a land that doesn't make any colored mana. And then of course 4 Evolving Wilds, which fix our mana and also enable Revolt for Fatal Push. So that's the deck, and now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener. We are on the play, and I see a lot of blue cards and 3 lands, so I think I'm keeping here. Turn 1 we probably need to get either a swamp or an island. So we can play turn 2 Jace. And I think I'm probably gonna get the island, so we have double blue for scatter and broken concentration. And then next turn we can play the Catacomb into Jace. Could also potentially wait on the Jace, so we can make sure to keep up the counter on 3. But Jace can also help us find another untapped land, as we keep drawing Evolving Wilds, which I guess help us transform the Jace, so it's not all bad. But yeah, between the Jace and our draw step, I think we can find another untapped land for these counter spells. Worst case scenario, we have Telling Time plus Evolving Wilds, which is kind of a combo, since you get to shuffle away unwanted cards. Oath of Nissa from the opponent, so our Jace is likely to survive. Isolated Chapel revealed, so our opponent at least 4 colors. So not entirely sure what they're up to, could be a Planeswalker deck. Alright, we found the untapped land, so we can't quite transform the Jace here if we wanted to. Could go Telling Time, Evolving Wilds, and activate, but that would still only be 4 cards in the graveyard, so I think we just keep up a counter here and say go. Also wanna keep up the Jace activation just to give us a little more information about what we should draw or discard with Jace. Alright, Oath of Liliana, I think that's worth countering, just because the Jace is pretty valuable here. And don't want to sacrifice it. So our opponent's definitely on a Super Friends kind of deck, with lots of Planeswalkers, where counter spells are pretty good. So let's use the Jace here, and see what we can find. Alright, can discard Evolving Wilds here. And on our turn, it's a little awkward that we found another Jace. So here we have the option of sacrificing Evolving Wilds and transforming our Jace. Keep up the scatter to the winds during the opponent's turn. And then on our turn, if we have used a scatter, we could go Telling Time, Flashback Telling Time. Yeah, don't hate that. So I think we do this now. Could also wait on transforming the Jace. But I think doing it now and getting that extra loyalty is worth it. And I think we want a mountain to have double red. And so the summit comes into play untapped, and now we can draw and discard. Probably discard this other Jace, even though it's not a bad card, but again we have the other Jace going. And yeah, this looks fine. Can plus the Jace. And if our opponent doesn't play anything worth countering, we still have a Telling Time. Now also Gearhulk, which could flash back Telling Time. Although if we flash it back with Jace, we can't flash it back with the Gearhulk anymore. And Kiora, it's not the most terrifying planeswalker, but I think it's still worth a scatter to the winds here, just because it will provide our opponent some card advantage. And we want to avoid that. Alright, Harness Lightning. So yeah, I think we want to cast this Telling Time main phase. Look for another counter spell or maybe another planeswalker. Well, I'll definitely take all the Dark Intimations I can get. Even though 6 land would be nice, but I mean, I've got to keep these against the planeswalker deck. And then I think I will minus right away on the Telling Time, just to use our mana efficiently here, and maybe now we can look for more lands besides the Dark Intimations. Well, don't have that option, so I guess we take the Scatter and then the other Dark Intimations. There are corner cases where our opponent could mill the top cards of our library. But now our opponent does get to resolve whatever they want. But hopefully that's just a planeswalker, and then we get to Dark Intimations, even get back a Jace. There we go. Perfect. Plus Saheeli. Hopefully no 2-mana creature here. Alright, it's time to enter Value Town, population me. And I think we do this right now. Get us a nice 4-for-1. And we have more where that came from. Even draw a land, perfect. Plus a Jace. And next turn we have Gearhulk with counterspells at the ready. For opponents resolves another planeswalker, here we have another one. So 6 mana, could be Sorin or Ajani. Instead it looks like our opponent might be holding on to either removal spells or counter spells. And Chandra's not a bad draw. So we could hang on to our counter spells here. But given that we have this Dark Intimations, it's actually not a bad idea to try and resolve our own planeswalkers. If the opponent counters them, we can still get them back. And if they don't counter them, they probably just die. We could actually flash back a Dark Intimations with the Jace, which is also pretty sweet, but that's maybe why your opponent isn't playing their own planeswalkers. If we had another instant in the graveyard to get value with the Gearhulk, I would probably wait. But I think applying pressure now that we're ahead is not a bad idea, so I think we'll go with the Chandra here. It's not the safest play ever, but can't go too wrong with the Chandra. Maybe our opponent on their turn plays a Sorin and kills Chandra, but that's still not the end of the world. Could have an Anguished Unmaking to exile Chandra, which would be mildly annoying since then we can't get her back with the Intimations. Still have lots of card advantage in store. Opponent with just a Liliana the Preserver. 5/5 flyer and our opponent gained some life, not the end of the world. And I think we just flash back the Dark Intimations from the graveyard, keep the one we have in hand, and we can also keep up a Harness Lightning for what it's worth. And probably want to do this main phase so we can get in for more damage with our elemental tokens, since Liliana is the only creature in play, or Planeswalker on the opponent's side. So make sure to keep up some mana here. So yeah, if you're looking for a card that's good in the Super Friends matchup, look no further. Can plus Chandra. Get in for 6. And we've got the next couple Planeswalkers covered. Chandra, Torch of Defiance could finish off our Jace Telepath Unbound. Fragmentize doesn't do much here. So Jace down, but we have another Jace. And here we could just try and kill the Chandra with our Chandra, which I actually don't hate. Maybe our opponent uses a removal spell on one of the elemental tokens and then we Dark Intimations them and then they're empty-handed with no board. And if this works, then we can save this for a future Planeswalker that might be harder to deal with. Alright, this works. So now I don't hate just hanging back on our counter spells. We could play the Jace, I guess, and still keep up Scatter, which is not bad. Alright, our opponent has seen the writing on the wall. So let's go ahead and play the Jace, keep up Scatter. And I even forgot to draw a card with Jace because we're so far ahead, we want to give our opponent a chance. Green Warden of Murasa, that's definitely a sticky creature we want to counter rather than kill. Don't want our opponent getting back a Planeswalker. Opponent with 1 card left. Let's draw some cards now. So can hit them for 6, end of turn Gearhulk, and next turn they should be dead. Tamiyo is gonna meet Gearhulk into, I guess, Broken Concentration. And alright, Oath of Liliana is going to resolve and is gonna get our Gearhulk, but Dark Intimations also gets back Torrential Gearhulk, as it turns out. Although our opponent doesn't have anything going on, so it's not a 4-for-1, just a 2-for-1. But let's plus here. Draw a card. And go ahead and attack. And I guess the safest play is technically to Dark Intimations, so we can get back the Gearhulk. And say go. Alright, now we get to plus. Draw one for good measure. Alright, there's a Glimmer. Now we can finally play the Glimmer and then Gearhulk into Glimmer. But it's not gonna be necessary. On to the next one. Okay, let's take a look at our opener, which looks decent. We've got a removal spell into Dark Intimations plus a Disciple. Don't love having the Disciple in my opening hand because it's only really good in a late game, but do have all our mana, so I think this is a keep. And probably just gonna get a Mountain with the Evolving Wilds. Next turn we can go Island to maybe Harness Lightning, and then we can play the Drowned Catacomb to have a third untapped land if we need it. So it looks like we're up against a white weenie deck, Consul's Lieutenant. So might want to wait on the Harness Lightning and try and get some more value out of this Radiant Flames. But our opponent did not have a 1-drop, so their hand might be a bunch of 2-drops, and we just drew Kozilek's Return. I guess there's no real reason not to keep up Harness Lightning, because if our opponent puts an enchantment on their Consul's Lieutenant, our removal spells might not be able to kill the Lieutenant anymore. So I'm just gonna take 2 here. Does mean our opponent gets a counter on the Lieutenant. But we do have all these removal spells available, and this is perfect. Opponent playing a Solemn Recruit, so now we can just play a land, play a sweeper. Question is, which sweeper do we play, Kozilek's Return or Radiant Flames? I kind of like the instant speed for the Kozilek's Return later in the game, when we are also holding up counter spells, but the 1 extra damage from Radiant Flames could also be relevant. And looking at our hand, we don't actually have very many instants, so it might be worth just casting the Kozilek's Return here, which means we could just wait and let our opponent untap. Could be a little risky if they have any instant speed bump spells, and there are a bunch in white, so I think I don't want to take any risks here. So I'm just going to main phase the Kozilek's Return here, I think. I think the 1 extra damage is going to be more relevant than potentially the instant speed on the Kozilek's Return. So 4 mana, Selfless Spirit comes down a turn too late for the opponent. And a Rogue's Passage as well. Ob Nixilis is not a bad draw. So here I think we just go Evolving Wilds, get I think another Mountain, and then probably Harness Lightning the Selfless Spirit. And always watching from the opponent, so in response we want to Harness Lightning, so we don't have to use as much energy. But I guess our opponent's just gonna sacrifice the Selfless Spirit in response regardless. So we don't get any energy because Harness Lightning doesn't have any illegal targets left and therefore gets countered, or fizzles in other words. Which means we can't resolve the Harness Lightning, therefore we don't get any energy. So now I think it's a good time to play out the Ob Nixilis and start drawing some cards. Next turn we can potentially go Disciple plus use the Disciple once. If the opponent plays a creature or a planeswalker, we also have the Dark Intimations. So in a very good spot here against a creature deck with a lot of removal in hand. Knight of the White Orchid is not bad for the opponent, they get a free land. And as we see here, the Radiant Flames looking a lot better than Kozilek's return. So we're not actually forced to minus to kill the Knight, since we can just play the Disciple and maybe tap it down. Could also play the Dark Intimations, although there's no creature in the graveyard yet. So actually don't hate just drawing a card with Ob Nixilis. See what we can find. Counterspell. Alright, so I think we do play the Disciple, and we're not too sad if the opponent kills the Disciple, because we have the Dark Intimations, and the Knights can't really kill Ob Nixilis here. Plus the Disciple can just block, so the opponent is forced to do something here. Declaration in Stone. So I think we want to... Let's see, we can either tap down the Knight, or we can force the opponent to spend 2 extra mana here to resolve the Declaration. I think tapping down the Knight is probably better. And I guess Harness Lightning in the graveyard is better in case we draw a Gearhulk. So we also get a clue, which isn't bad. And nothing else from the opponent. Unlicensed Disintegration, so here we could Dark Intimations. And the opponent doesn't have a ton of cards left in hand, so this might be the best time to do it. Unfortunately our creature did get exiled, so it's not like we're gonna get back the Disciple. But I think we might as well draw the card with Ob Nixilis first. Another counterspell. So I don't really see how we lose if we just keep up 2 scatters. So I don't think we want to use the Dark Intimations this turn. I think we just say go. And we might even let Ob Nixilis take 3 here. Could also use the Unlicensed Disintegration. I guess using the Disintegration is not bad. Sure. Still have 1 scatter up. If our opponent doesn't play anything worth countering, we have the clue to sack. Just another Rogue's Passage. And we could ultimate Ob Nixilis here, and I think we do that since we can then get back Ob Nixilis with the Dark Intimations. Plus we can also still hold up Scatter to the Winds. So let's tap down that Aether Hub. Opponent doesn't have a creature in play, but they still have to discard, we get to draw, and we get back Ob Nixilis. So not the full 4-for-1, but pretty close. Opponent also lost life from the Ob Nixilis emblem. And yeah, looks like our opponents had enough. So Dark Intimations, pretty good card. Opponent keeps losing life for every card we draw. So I think we can play Ob Nixilis and keep up Scatter. And I think we're gonna win this game without ever attacking. Which is not something that happens very often, unless you're playing, I guess, Sphinx's Tutelage. opponent keeps drawing lands, but at this point, even if they draw the best card in their deck, they're probably still losing. So let's cast a Dark Intimations here. Make the opponent discard their last card, which was a removal spell, which was pretty dead. Guess we can play a Thing in the Ice, but our opponent's just going to die as soon as they draw a card here to the Ob Nixilis emblem. So we can say go. And there we go. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener. We're on the play. This hand could be a little awkward since most of these come into play tapped. We don't have double blue. Yeah, I think this hand looks good on the surface, but might not be good enough. This hand, on the other hand, looks pretty great. So we get to go turn to either Jace or Telling Time. Just need to make sure we keep hitting our land drops, but with Telling Time and Jace that should not be a problem. And I think the sooner we resolve Jace, the better. So let's just go for him now. Opponent has single green, so they can't kill it. At least not right away. And try to keep hitting our land drops. We have more than enough removal. Opponent with a Primal Druid. So it looks like an Emerge deck. So let's use a Jace here. Is there a reason to Telling Time first? I don't think so. So let's loot first. And there's a land, and I think we want to discard probably this Radiant Flames. It's not great against Primal Druid. And could also Telling Time here, in case we find a land that always comes into play tapped. And I don't think I'm fatal pushing here, so might as well Telling Time now too. And I'll take the land and the Harness Lightning. I think we have enough late game that we don't need a Disciple. So yeah, let's take the Sulfur Falls and the Harness Lightning on top. And then play a tapped Sunken Hollow. Alright, so we're in decent shape here. We have pretty much perfect mana. And alright, so it looks like our opponent's more of a ramp deck than we thought. Nissa's Pilgrimage. So do need to watch out for large green creatures. Don't have a counterspell yet, which is kind of a problem. That's kind of the card you want against the ramp deck. But we are getting close to transforming Jace. I think we just play Kalitas and then we can just exile the Primal Druid. That way our opponent doesn't get to search for a land, since the Druid doesn't technically die with Kalitas in play. And I don't think we need to activate Jace yet, since I don't think there's a better play here than Kalitas. So I think I'll just go with Kalitas, and then we can postpone the decision on Jace and see what our opponent does, which could inform our decision. Could have potentially looked for a counterspell, but it's not like on 5 mana our opponent is gonna play a backbreaking card. That's fine, can just kill that one. Opponent still gets to draw cards, so it's not like they really lost card advantage there. But I think this is still fine. And we did, after all, find a counterspell, so maybe got punished a little bit. And here I'm actually considering discarding the Jace, just because we'll already have a Jace in play, so that makes the second Jace a little awkward. And all these other cards look pretty good. So yeah, let's discard the Jace. And a land is good here, so we can Disintegration this one, Fatal Push this one, get 2 tokens, and it's not like green is gonna have any sweeper effects. Disintegration here, since I think we're gonna do that no matter what. Now we can draw and discard with Jace. And I think we discard the island here. Could also discard the Harness Lightning. But I think discarding island is fine. And then we can play a tapped Fumarole and still play the Fatal Push. And get in with Kalitas. And plus the Jace. And Jace can potentially flash back a Disintegration or maybe a Telling Time next turn. Alright, so applying pressure against the ramp deck, of course they'll play some large creatures. So our goal here is to try and close out the game as quickly as possible, because the late game might not be in our advantage. Don't mind seeing Evolving Wilds. Nissa is also fine, opponent isn't gonna transform her this turn, and we have Harness Lightning to cheaply get rid of Nissa. Opponent needs 7 lands, so unless they have a ramp spell here, but for 2 mana, I don't think that's gonna happen. Alright, so in a decent position, don't wanna play Kozilek's Return here, but we can Harness Lightning, keep up our counterspell, and attack for a whole bunch. Opponent takes 7 down to 10. And I don't think mono green is gonna have the tools to come back from this. They would need something like an Ulamog to get rid of our Kalitas, but they're already at 10, we have so many tokens and they only have 6 lands. Gaia's Revenge is actually not bad, we can't counter that one. And we can't actually kill it with our unlicensed Disintegration. But our opponent also can't afford to attack with it, so it's just playing defense. And we could consider sacrificing a zombie here to Kalitas, since I think we're gonna do that no matter what at some point. So might as well do it now. If we animate Fumarole, attack with everyone, our opponent is probably just gonna block the Fumarole and take a 9. We could also flash back this Radiant Flames with Jace, also play Kozilek's Return and get rid of the Gaia's Revenge. But it might just be better to offer the trade. Could also sack 2 zombies to Kalitas. Either way, I think we're definitely attacking with the Kalitas. Question is if we also send in the zombies. I think getting in with everyone is fine here, since we can sack 2 zombies to Kalitas, that way our opponent can't actually make the trade happen. So yeah, let's just sack a zombie here. And again, mono green, I don't think we'll have the tools to get rid of this Kalitas once it has this much toughness. And do it once again. And we'll get a new zombie for the Gaia's Revenge. And we can still plus a Jace. So our opponent did buy a turn there, but they will still only have 8 mana here, which I don't think is enough to accomplish too much. Blister Pod, not great against Kalitas, since Kalitas will exile the Blister Pod, the opponent won't get the Scion token, and a Hermit of the Naturnals. Quite the tongue twister. So I think here we want to flash back Radiant Flames and then just attack and maybe sack the zombie so it doesn't die to our own Radiant Flames. So let's try and do that. And see if the opponent has any interaction, maybe a pump spell of some sort. Doesn't look like it, so now we get to attack, and unless they have a fog, they are dead. Or I guess a flash creature could also jump in front and block. There's a few in green our opponent could have here. Nope, looks like we got there. Alright, sweet. I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.